life is all about learning, right? That's the whole purpose of it. And so I always find myself saying, one of the most important things that I learned is blah 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 blah. And the truth of the matter is I've learned lots of important things, right? But one of the important things that I learned on this journey that we call life is how to temper myself, right? Emotional regulation, how to manage my emotions, my thoughts, and the actions that those emotions and thoughts create. And I think that emotional regulation is probably one of the most important things that we can learn in this life. If, as a parent, you can teach it to your children, you've literally taught them the hardest lesson straight out the gate. There are so many other things for them to learn, but that right there, that will take them places and open doors that math, reading, history could never. But the fact that I've learned it and I am continually in the process of mastering it isn't really what's important. That's not what this video is about. I want to share about the crisis that necessitated me truly learning to temper myself. So at the time, lots of things were happening. My brother-in-law passed away. I was having difficulties in my marriage. My oldest daughter was out of town and she was facing difficulties that I couldn't necessarily manage for her. We were smack dab in the middle of the adoption process and I had a supervisor from hell. All of that was going on at the same time. And I was relying on God to get me through all of it. And he'd given me some really specific instructions about all of it. As it pertained to the job, I understood that God was the source and it was just a resource. I have never had a problem with finding another job. I'm blessed right now to be able to work my part-time job and do my coaching, focus on the things that I'm passionate about. And because of the illegal ways that my last full-time employment situation was handled, I'm not destitute. But the point is I have never had a problem finding a job or keeping one. And at that time, I wanted nothing more than to chuck the deuces. Now, I didn't want to leave the employer entirely. I just wanted to leave that particular position because I had invested a number of years and I was certainly on my way to being able to retire early. Year 20 was still some ways out. And as a result, I didn't want to quit. So if you know, you know. But I was afraid that I was going to end up putting pause on old girl. For the benefit of this story, let's just call her Karen. Karen had this unnatural, inappropriate obsession with me. The issue was not my work product. It wasn't my attendance. It wasn't my professionalism. It wasn't my ability to collaborate, my teamwork. It wasn't me. It was her inability to control me, her inability to bend me to her will. It drove her nuts that I wouldn't go to lunch with her, share details about my personal life with her, share my opinion about work-related things that were not exactly in my purview, provide her with medical information that she was not owed, communicate with her about things that I was the only one who got to decide whether I wanted to share them or not. And when I wouldn't tell her my business, tell her what she wanted to know, or relinquish control over my person, she would just make up her own stories. She'd make assumptions and ask me questions in an attempt to get me to confirm or deny the assumptions that she'd made. That has never and will never be a part of my personality. I didn't tell you to tell yourself that damn story, so I'm not going to take responsibility for convincing you that the story you told yourself is not true. You could tell yourself whatever you want to tell yourself. What you believe is not my problem. I don't care if you scream it from the mountaintops and tell everybody you know. The truth doesn't need defense, and I will never defend it. And anybody who you tell who is stupid enough to believe you should not be stupid enough to ask me about it. Because they gonna get the same thing that you get. Silence. I'm actually entertained by people being loud and wrong. And I love knowing things about me that other people don't. Especially when those other people can't compete where they don't compare. Now that little tidbit is for the crazy stalkers whose lives are so miserable that they make fake page after fake page so that they can continue to come to my pages, mind my business, and make up stories about my life in an effort to make themselves feel better about their miserable existence, giving credence to the scientific belief that psychosis has a genetic component. Now, back to Karen and her shenanigans. None of the things that she was attempting to control were actually job related. The information that she was not receiving would have had absolutely no legitimate impact on her ability to supervise me. She did not need details about my medical condition to do her job or supervise me doing mine. She didn't need details about my brother-in-law's hospitalization to do her job or supervise me doing mine. And no, she was not trying to support me through those things. She was nosy as hell and offended that this black woman had the unmitigated gall to tell her no and stand on it. She would even go to the HR manager and complain about the fact that I wouldn't tell her my business. And yes, she would try to make it work-related. On more than one occasion, she even tried to write me up for insubordination. But even the HR manager would see through the BS. The only problem is HR does not work for the employee. HR's job is to guide the employer to make decisions that they can defend in court and dissuade them from making decisions that they can't, regardless of how those decisions impact the employees. They're basically there to remind the employers of the laws and help them figure out how to work around them without getting in trouble. If they are on your side, they'll be let go just like you will. But this particular HR manager had heard enough about Karen's shenanigans, not just from me, but from everyone else who'd ever reported to her, especially everyone who looked like me. And she'd had her own experiences with Karen crossing the line, inserting her nose where it didn't belong, inserting her opinion where it had not been asked. So she already knew what it was. The HR manager also happened to look like me. And while her hands were tied and there was very little that she could actually do about Karen's ridiculous behavior, when Karen did contact her, she would tell her what was right. And when I contacted her, she would give me good advice about how to navigate around Karen's foolishness. She would encourage me to keep good records, to record Karen's shenanigans, to escalate situations that got out of control. And eventually, after years and years of that, 8 years to be exact, Karen finally went too far and did something that the HR manager absolutely would not be able to defend in court. And Karen's behind was finally disciplined, and I got a new supervisor. But Karen didn't lose her job. She had to do some more stuff to some more people before she was forced to retire. But smack dab in the middle of Karen and all her shenanigans, I had a clear direction from God to be still. And I understood why I needed to do that. I was adopting a child who had a medical issue and they needed to be on my medical insurance. There were some financial things that were going to come down the pike that I couldn't have predicted, but God could. There were some other people who were going to join the team who were going to need my support. And while I was at my wits' end with Karen, they were going to be relying on my skills and tools to keep their jobs, their sanity, and to stay out the slammer. Because the stuff that Karen would do would have you wanting to put your hands around her throat, for real. She wasn't just nosy. She wasn't just pushy. She wasn't just controlling. She was downright disrespectful. She was racist and mentally ill. And that's not preposition. One day she accidentally took 2 doses of her medication. And magically, she was more normal, tolerable, and pleasant than anyone had ever seen her on any day. And when the day almost came to an end, she looked at her pill case and realized that both that day's medicine slot and the following days was empty. And she came asking me, because of my education in behavioral health, whether she should go to the emergency room because she'd taken double the dose. I was not going to give her any medical advice, but since she was telling me her damn business, I asked her what medicine it was. And when she told me, it all made sense. I immediately knew what her diagnosis was. And I realized that as troublesome as her behavior was, without comprehensive therapy and a lifelong dedication to challenging her own impulses and resisting her natural urges, this woman almost had no choice but to be a damn psychopath. I suggested that she call her doctor, let him or her know that she'd taken double the dose, follow whatever instructions they gave her. And I also suggested that she ask them if they could increase her dosage. When she asked me why, I told her flat out, everybody in the office had enjoyed one of the most peaceful days at work we'd all had in years. She was offended, realizing that I couldn't convince her to change her dosage. And the same way she couldn't control me, I couldn't control her. But I was going to have to do a better job of controlling me. That as much as I needed Jesus, I needed something else. I needed to figure out how to prevent the things that Karen did from adding to my stress level, from having an effect on me emotionally, from impacting my behavior, because I wanted to keep my job, even though I did want to get the hell away from her. And I did not want to go to jail. And then I met a life coach.